Well, I hope everybody can hear me now. Sonia, can you hear me?
It looks like we're good.
Super. So that was scary, huh? So on and off and on and off. So I guess that's the beauty about technology. When it really works, it's really cool. But when something goes wrong, everything goes haywire. Anyway, we are back. And I guess we're starting with the first question.
Yes. All right. So I'm going to just repeat it for everyone, just because. So, why do horses seemingly go better when switching from a bad saddle to bareback?
Yes. So when people say bad saddle, we need to specify what does bad saddle mean. Does bad saddle maybe mean that the tree is poking, like you see here, my cursor, into the scapula? That is very often the case, that when the saddle is not properly adjusted in the tree width, that's the space between the D-ring. Every saddle has a D-ring. And if you focus on the height of the D-ring of whatever saddle you have, or if you have a Western saddle, the concho, the distance from the bar in the Western saddle or the distance from the D-rings from each other indicates the tree width. And then down the side from the D-ring, 4 inches or so, that's the tree. I'm going to show you here. I'm going to blow this up a little bit. That's the, nope, it doesn't want to play with me today. Okay, then don't. That's right here. That's the tree points, and those can be in various different angles. That's a tree angle. So if the saddle doesn't fit properly in there and you put a treeless saddle on, then of course the horse will go much, much better. The other bad saddle could be if the channel is not wide enough and the tree is pinching on, this is the vertebrae here. You see the nerve endings coming out on the bottom, and the multifidus muscle, a very important muscle, very thin, very small, but so important to be free. So if the saddle pinches the spine, or worse, it's not sitting in the center, we call that bridge fitting, and it digs into the loin, any of that, the horse will instantly go better in a treeless saddle, because the treeless saddle doesn't have, or bareback pad, it doesn't have a saddle tree. Now, everything it has an advantage and disadvantage. If you don't have a saddle tree in a treeless saddle or bareback pad or even bareback, the horse may seem to go well, but the horse will tighten his back muscle because your impact of your seat bones are way above the threshold a horse's muscle or tissue can hold. How can I say that? Well, let's look at this. In this article from 2014 in University of Scotland, they did some testing with treeless saddles, bareback riding. And with bareback riding or treeless saddles or saddle pads, the pounds per square inch, or the kPa, is over 25. And what does they say here? If the pressure is over 4.66, then the tissue will be damaged. In other words, the muscle doesn't get enough oxygen, blood flow. And if the pressure is over 4.66, now 25 is 5 times the amount. So you think, oh, that's much better, because without a tree, all this pressure around the shoulder is not happening because it doesn't have a tree. But the muscle will atrophy, and you see most of the time horses who are a bareback or go with treeless saddle have these horrible holding lines, because the back muscle will trying to do anything it can to stop the pressure. What pressure? There's different ways of getting pressure. This is a computerized saddle pad, what goes with a sensor via Bluetooth, and you can do it under the saddle, or you can do it bareback, and you can see and read how much pressure is from the seat bones to the horse's back. Did that make sense, Sonia?
Yeah, that made perfect sense. And then I have another question. What are some issues for the rider when riding bareback?
Okay, so when we think about how our body works, and I quote a lot Dr. James Warson. Dr. James Warson is a veterinary, a doctor, and he wrote the book, The Rider's Pain-Free Back. And in his book, he explains how different the male and the female spine is. So if we know there is massive difference between the male and the female back and seat bones and tissues, and we're riding in, well, treeless, we're going to ask ourselves, why is the male rider so much easier for him to ride in a, well, bareback or treeless saddles? The easy part is, if we look at from the, well, anatomy, let me just switch to my PowerPoint. Let me see if I have a better slide on this one here. The easy part is the pelvis axis. In other words, where we balance ourselves on our seat bones. It's smack in the center on the male rider. On the female, the pelvis axis is way more forward. So if we look at the pelvis from the side, you can see the male pelvis here has a longer tailbone, straighter in the lower back, and our gluteus maximus sits closer to the horse's back than on the female. Why? Because the lady has more lordosis, more curvature in the lower back, shorter tailbone. That gives the birth channel the effect. And her hip sockets are more forward and her femur comes out more straighter. So if we rotate that pelvis and look from the bottom, here you see the tailbone on the male, here on the female. And the center of the hip socket is why and how the medical doctors confine that as the pelvis axis. Okay, you can see it's smack in the center with the guy, but the female is in the front. So when a male rides treeless, okay, so obviously we need to watch that we don't hurt ourselves. It's easier for us to balance because our long tailbone, gluteus maximus, sits closer to the horse's back and our legs are underneath us and they hang straight down. Now, if I compare that to a lady, you can again see that complete different pelvis to the right. Let me find you another PowerPoint. Maybe it's on this one here where I can show you a good slide. Here's that book I was referring from Dr. James Warson. And he has a wonderful explanation. Here you can see on shoulder, hips, and heels on the female, shoulder, hips, and heels on the male. Now look how little space is between his buttocks and the horse's back. And look how much space there is between the lady's buttocks and the horse's back. Now, if you try to push against your anatomy, if you go against law of nature and you force your seat back to get the connection, your lower back and your disc will have a problem, right? So if you lean back, that's the pelvis, and you force your lower back forward, that blue stuff, that's what we call the disc. So vertebrae, here's the disc, a healthy disc. A slip disc, very painful. A collapsed disc, well, you need to go under the knife. Many, many riders have been operated in L4, L5 because if you're in the wrong gender appropriate saddle, you will lean back. If you ride bareback, here we go and look at this pelvis on the tree. Look at the top of the vertebrae. Every vertebrae on your body, it's parallel, horizontal. Okay, the dotted red line is now parallel to the top of the vertebrae, and you can see, in order not to crush the pubic symphysis, the bone structure on your pelvis, there's a withers. You lean back. If you say, well, I sit further back, then you sit in the middle of the horse's back and you bounce. Now, remember what I said about the pelvis axis and the shorter tailbone and that space you have behind and below your seat bottom. Okay, so when you lean back like this, your leg shoots forward, and now you will probably try to sit upright and force your upper body straight, and there goes, your disc. So the detrimental part, the super problem for riders riding in the non-gender appropriate saddle, females most of the time in the male saddle, or riders riding bareback, it is physical, impossible to use your body the way nature has intended, to balance this without damaging your lower back. And that is why if you don't have a supple seat, this is an old saying out of the Spanish riding school, the horse will suffer pain. Okay, so you think it's much better for the horse? Quite the contrary. You apply 25 kPa, that is 5 times the amount of pressure the muscle and the back of the horse can sustain, and your weight comes double in. So let's visualize this. You jump forward on a floor, you bounce, and you need to absorb the impact. If you jump forward and you do not pivot in your knees or in your pelvis, your fillings in the teeth will fall out because the impact is so hard, and you blow your disc and hurt your knees and your pelvis. So imagine the impact you do to the horse. Riding bareback is not only super bad for the horse, but super bad for the rider.
Okay, perfect. Wonderful explanation. And the last question I have in regards to sort of the bareback is, what is your opinion on treeless saddles and also bareback pads?
Well, we kind of touched base a little bit in that last comment.
A little bit. We talked a bit more about bareback, but do you have any particular opinions about some of the treeless saddles that are out there that claim to protect the horse and some of the common issues that are seen? And just as a note for some of our viewers, we have actually contacted some of these manufacturers and invited them to send us a demo to test. The testing that we do is done via Metalogic pads, so the sensor pad, Gait Analysis, heart monitor. So we take opinion out of the equation, and we have yet to hear back from anyone who is actually willing to have their saddle tested.
Well, I think that's also a reason why you don't find any equine journal or veterinarians publishing a paper and actually comment on it. For me, it started off with that bareback pad on the top right. It was the pad where was get buckled down underneath the pony's belly so the little kid can sit on the horse and has something to hold on to it. Then it got advanced into the bareback pad with stirrup leathers. Like you have a little hook where you can put your leathers on. And they put a little bit more foam around that bareback pad and called it now a saddle. A saddle, what is a saddle? A saddle is that unit what is on the top of that pole on the bicycle seat. Now imagine somebody invents a bicycle seat without frame. Nobody would sit on that bicycle seat because you would sit on top of the pole and you would impale yourself. Horrible. So we need in the bicycle seat a frame to create a structure to get the bicycle rider comfortable into enjoying paddling through the roads. Same with the saddle for horses. We need a structure what gives the rider the support, and without structure, it is a very clever marketing because a bareback pad costs no more than 35 euros. But if you put the saddle behind it, you can put a couple zeros behind it. Now it's 3,500 or 2,500 euros. So imagine you look at a horse or a human. Horse or human have skeletons. Most animals have skeletons. Some animals have no skeleton. But if you have a horse what has a skeleton, have an animal what has a skeleton, such as the withers, the horse has withers. Look at the bones, okay? And in order not to damage, like you see here, the spinal processes here, it's the top of the withers. In order not to damage this, we need to build a structure what bridges these sensitive bones and distributes the rider over the point. This will not work with a nice neoprene or leather or felt or any kind of a material unless you have a tree. It's the saddle tree is another word for the skeleton of the horse. Skeleton of the saddle. If you clone a human or clone a horse, but manipulate the DNA in such a manner that you clone a human or a horse without skeleton, you will have a lump of meat, a muscle, and organs flop in a spot. So that's how you got to visualize a treeless saddle. For us, Saddlefit for Life, just like Sonia says, we got to go with hardcore facts and nature. They are very inexpensive tools how you can measure the gait analysis. And I'm not just talking about how high the front leg flinks. I'm also talking about how the hind leg comes underneath. There's very simple tools how you can measure the stress level of an animal by measure the heart monitor, the pulse, because we know through increased cortisol, the horse has stress. And we also, as I already mentioned, or Sonia, we know we can use the computerized saddle pads so we can measure the impact of the rider in sitting trot or rising trot. Imagine you do the rising trot, okay? And the stirrup leather is in this area, how they will pull tight over it. So in my experience, and every treeless saddles we have been tested, we yet have to see one what works. And I yet have to see an university or veterinarian who gives an unbiased opinion to proper testing how this treeless saddle's supposed to work. Stay with what works for 4,500 years. Okay, so we have always used trees for 4,500 years. Yes, there are some people who rode bareback for a while, but the whole idea is that a saddle needs to distribute the pressure for the horse.
And just to add in, so people have been riding horses for, thousands of years. The creation of the saddle tree specifically was to allow the weight of the rider to be distributed over the proper structures of the horse's back. That is the number one reason a saddle tree was created. So when you come across something like a treeless saddle or a bareback pad, think to yourself, who is this really benefiting? People back then, before technology, before diagnostic tools, they knew to protect the horse, and they knew that distributing the weight created longevity in the animal, made the animal easier to ride, and made it so that the animal would even stumble less. So when you come across a saddle with no tree or anything that, tries to vilify a saddle tree in itself, really question why. Who does this benefit? Is it a marketing ploy? And you'll have your answer.
That was a very well sentence there, because they did not have social media back then or means of trying to come up with stories. You said it perfectly. They knew that was a huge asset for them. Like for us, we value our cars. If somebody comes up with an idea and says, hey, you know what, pour sugar in the gas tank, I think you get better mileage, you won't find a single person who actually does it. Maybe there's some of the other people who are just too stupid to breathe oxygen, but the general people will not put sugar in their gas tank because they say, I'm going to destroy my car. And back then, the horse was super, super important to humans. Plow the field, get themselves from A to B. That was a big value. So they did not do something for destroying the horse's back. Look at the first tree, like Sonia just explained, super wide here. Now we have super stupid saddles who are super narrow and hurting the horse which is
fashion. It's fashion.
Fashion, right? And it's horrible, and it creates so much problem that the deformity it's visible on the horse's scapulars. You know, here we see a nice normal scapula without bone deformity or extra bone growth, and here we see how the bone grows, and that's how bone, from what I understand. Sonia, you want to help me out there? How Dr. Catalina was mentioned that?
So what happens is if there is additional tension or pull on the bone, and Helen, I know she has joined us as well, if there's additional tension or torque put on the bone, which is outside the normal range of motion and what is, I guess, normal considered within the body will add additional bone deposits to create stability and support. And the same goes for if, excuse me, when a horse is ridden upside down and the spinous or the spinous processes, they touch. So that is instability. First of all, it causes inflammation. And then what happens is the body sends additional bone to try and stabilize and essentially glue all the vertebrae together to prevent that constant movement, the rubbing, and the inflammation and the trauma. And so when you have the scapula, for example, if there is some sort of trauma to it, or if the saddle tree is, putting pressure on it, the body will send additional bone to try and create more support and stability.
Yeah, that was super cool explained. And how much were we in heaven when we were in South Africa and we learned all that?
It was such a treat. And for anyone who hasn't checked them out yet, the Helen Elena Equine Research Project, check them out on Facebook. They have, I believe, over 12 years of specimens that they've done dissections on. They have the full history on. We were introduced to them sort of by accident, but they have become a huge contributor, and we are also trying to get all of their findings out to the world because this is what people need to see.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Sonia, what I always say, you have beautiful horses like this one here, and the breeders breed them with such a long neck now and such a long legs, but look at the ring of lights here. What makes it super difficult for riders and saddle makers, that's a huge horse, but the ring of light is here. So that means the back of the saddle can't go past my cursor here, and the shoulder blade goes that far back. This is a horse what is 17.3 hand tall, and the saddle support area is 14 inch. I mean, sure, we can deform the horse, and the horse shows it in deformity, holding line, and tension to the part where the horse checks out. They don't have any more light in their eyes, and they are completely destroyed inside and outside. So that is why we do what we do, and we don't need to do that to the animals anymore.
And I have a few more questions. The first one is, can a rider's asymmetries cause a tree to change shape?
Yes, so this is a very good question. Let me go to that. So I like to think about the example with John Wayne. Everybody knows the actor John Wayne, who played all in the Western movies. And when you look the way he walked extremely bow-legged. And what do you think happened to his soles, particularly to his heels? He wore them out on the outside. And for anybody who knows they are extremely knock-kneed, the heel on the inside will be extremely worn. Now there are wooden heels, rubber heels, but the wear and tear is on that. Now this saddle tree itself comes in many different structures. One tree could be maybe rawhide. One is neoprene kind of a tree. One tree maybe could be a tree what is made out of carbon fiber. So before you really twist or change the tree, the first what you will do, you will change the flocking like John Wayne did with the heels. Okay, you change the flocking, they get uneven pressed. So that can be done nice and smooth and even. And you change the seat foam. The seat foam that's underneath the seat leather or the ground seat in the Western saddle that you will form and deform before you change the tree. Now, if you have one of those super flex trees, here are the old wooden trees, you will not change them, rawhide trees. This is a steel reinforced wood piece. Now, that can be pulled and also twisted if you do not look after your stuffing and the seed foam first. Eventually, the tree will twist, not the rawhide trees or the solid trees, but the spring tree, adapt tree, flex tree, all those trees who have a little bit more flexibility, like horse's spine or the horse's spine, they will twist. But first, the seed foam and the wool will shift. And if you stay on top of it and make sure not only you look after yourself and after your body and get it treated, but also get your saddle regular checked and realigned and make the stuffing and the seed foam nice and even.
Okay, and one thing to add is swapping saddles from horse to horse will also damage the tree. That is a surefire way to twist or change the shape of a saddle tree when you take one saddle and put it on many different horses.
Yeah, it's kind of like shoes again, right? So if everybody wears everybody's shoes, sometimes I went, my brother and I, we used to do figure skating. And when I stepped in his figure skate, he said, how can he skate in this? His footbed was so different than mine. And people who have shared shoes with their brothers or sisters or friends, you step in somebody else's shoes and say, oh, that's a weird feeling. So your foot forms a footbed in that shoe, unless you have rubber boots, right? Those shoes or boots completely made out of rubber, solid rubber, right? And that's why the manufacturers make saddles out of carbon fiber or plastic. Those rigid plastic trees or carbon fibers, I mean, you can drive with your car over, nothing happens. The detriment to those, the horse's back is not able to move and you are not able to feel the horse. But if you are one of these person who needs to have one saddle for all your horses, that for sure will protect your saddle, but not your horse. So Sonia, great point on not swapping saddles, like you wouldn't want to swap shoes with the entire family.
Exactly. So I have another question. So this one is from Ray and Nanette. We have had saddle fitters say they fitted a nice dressage saddle to our horse, but he seems uncomfortable. When we put a Western saddle on him, he changed completely for the better. What does that say about him? And how can we get him in a dressage saddle comfortably? And just to sort of start off the answer, we have to look at the weight-bearing surface of both saddle styles.
Yes, so if you look at this picture here, and we stay off the lumbar area of the spine and of the shoulder, that area is an average of 115 to 120 air square inch. So if you look from the side, your average English tree is that wide line, comes down here. And the new ones who are horrible, they go really narrow here. See the cursor, Sonia? All right, and then it comes down here. So you see, very, very little, the tree has weight-bearing surface on that animal. So that is what is right now absolutely the problem, because the pounds per square inch on that small surface area versus the entire surface area a Western saddle will do, okay, is horrible. So you have very little pounds per square inch, and you see it very often. Pressure here, pressure here, pressure in the back, nothing supports in the middle. That's a view from the top, from the rear. And the red is the inflammation that's done with a thermography camera. Many trees, this is a saddle upside down, are too tight in the tree. Many, 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 many trees. Okay. Many veterinarians dissect horses and show how the tree, what sits behind the shoulder, okay, put axis pressure on. This is an English tree versus a Western tree. A Western tree has so much more weight-bearing surface. So if you go English, I cannot emphasize enough to go with the binate, which is English for you on top, and Western on the bottom. Binate means made or born of two equal parts. So you got a super narrow twist for the rider and a super wide twist for the horse. Again, more weight-bearing surface. And that's why majority of the horses love the Western saddle more than in English saddles, because most English saddles, or like Science, and we see them too when we test them, are now too much pressure. You'll see from the side the view, from the top here, an old-fashioned army saddle. Then you see the Western saddle. Look at all the weight-bearing surface. And then a look at the English. Needless to say, the English saddle, unless it's a binate or has a pounds per square inch panel, you might want to check that out, the PSI panels, they will always put way too high pressure on the horse's back.
And one other thing that I did want to mention is looking at the flocking, because a lot of dressage specifically, the flocking in the panels is like a fluffy pillow, whereas what we consider the panel of the Western saddle is typically felt or sheepskin, and it doesn't have the give. So that also helps with distributing pressure and not allowing tree points to fall through and create localized pressure on the horse.
100%, 100%. You know, so I'm approaching 60, and all my life I have been riding. And in the beginning of my years, I can't remember a single saddle what was fluffy. And as a saddle maker, I was trained for years to make a very flat, smooth, but firm panel, kind of like a Navajo pad on a Western saddle. You know, there's no Western saddle with a fluffy pad, and yet the horses prefer it. So the old saddles were stuffed out of deer hair and horsehair. And when I learned this trade in 1978, all the way until I did my master's, our way we've been taught is to create with a flocking, what is stuffing. The best you can use as a saddle maker is 40% synthetic, 60% wool. That gives you the density and strength and stability like horsehair and deer hair. Then you can create a flat, firm mattress, what is soft to the muscle, but it distributes these tree points and these narrow rails. If, exactly like Sonia was just saying, all these new saddles are fluffy and soft, great for the manufacturer. You don't need skilled labor. Some manufacturers even blow the wool in with air, but it has no support. And for all you non-believers, I guarantee you, when you lay on the mattress with no support, you cannot. Your back will hurt you so much, because a sleep mattress where you sleep all night but does not give you support, your back will hurt. Everybody knows you sleep much better on a firmer mattress. Now, I'm not saying hard concrete mattress, but I'm saying you got to sleep in a bed what gives your spine support. And that spine and the saddle is the tree. And without a firm, flat, smooth, even stuffed panel, the tree will always hurt the horse. Excellent point, Sonia.
Okay, and I have one question. Let me just go back to it quickly. Is it better to never ride bareback, or is it okay to do it once in a while, like less than 10%?
Okay, so of course it's okay to ride once a while bareback, you know, so it doesn't hurt if you sit on your horse and ride. Think about the way it used to be, you know, before we had saddles. What do we do with horses? You know, we use them for mainly to plow or to keep stuff moving from A to B. Very rare we actually ridden on it. And if you say, well, the American natives never had saddles. Oh, yes, they did. Not right away in the beginning, but they did too. Now, when did they sit on the horse? Every day for half an hour to do a little jumping or dressage or hunt or whatever? No, they sit on the horse to go for the hunt. And they didn't go and hunt the buffalo every day, you know, so, or they didn't go to the war every day. So once in a while you sit on the horses, and you very rarely see women back in the old days who were riding, for sure not with your legs apart and your seat bones drilling into the horse's back. We talked about in the beginning of this webinar how difficult it is or physically impossible for a female to ride bareback. So once in a while, no, it doesn't hurt. But consistently sitting on the horse, it's a problem. This guy here, they're not always sleeping on the horse all day long. Or look how he sits. He's sleeping. It's a very, very famous statue when he's at watch. Okay, horse and rider sleeping. So that's the answer.
And I'd just like to add, the reason we don't recommend bareback riding, especially for any gait above a walk, is not just because of what it does to the horse, but what it does to the rider. So you suddenly have to compensate, and you do so without thinking about it, to protect sensitive parts, to stay with the movement, to not bounce around. So in the end, it is, I wouldn't say detrimental, even though it technically is, to both horse and rider. So for your own sake and for the sake of your horse, I would limit it to, first of all, mostly just walk and very, very rarely. And I have another question. I have two actually. So what are your views on a semi-flex tree saddle? I believe that is similar to the Western tree that we have, where the panel part is made out of a rubber-like material.
Yes, so next week, Sonia, remind me or maybe ask the question again, because we are approaching our end of our hour, even with our additional time here. But it would be good because then I have camera again and I can show exactly what a semi-flex tree is. I'm trying to answer that very quick. We have in our saddle trees, when I'm talking now we as Jochen Schleese, who manufactures saddles, we use an adapt tree. And like every other saddle tree, what has reinforcement for the pommel, so it doesn't crush the withers. It has also steel from front to back. We know that as spring steel. It depends on the rider's weight. We make that spring steel very thin or very strong. Obviously, so heavier the rider, so stronger the spring steel. The whole idea is when the back goes up and down and the rider goes up and down, the impact of these two beings, horse and rider, needs to be feathered with the right amount of spring in the tree, kind of like a spring in your car. If you have a semi-truck or you have a pickup truck and you load a lot of weight in it, your springs on that pickup truck would be way, way stronger. So think about the spring steel on the saddle. It's like the springs on the car. So heavier the load, so stronger the springs on the car. And with this adapt tree, we adapt the spring steel to the rider's weight. A semi-flex saddle, it's kind of like a very, very rigid tree, and it flexes just a little bit. So I hear two terms in semi-flex. One, it just barely flexes. You have to be a lot of weight. Or it could also be, like you said, Sonia, the tree, what I like to show next week, tree, what is very rigid from left to right in the swell and in the cantle area, but super floppy in the center. So maybe we can get back to that question next time, Sonia.
Okay, and just to point out, that semi-flex tree that we have, you can basically fold it with your hands.
Yeah, so, I want to show that next time.
Yeah.
And then talk a little bit about the courses we offer and the videos people can do.
So just one last question, and then we'll get to the courses. And this one should be a relatively quick one. What do you think about side saddle for women and also for the horse?
I absolutely love them if they're fitted correctly. And what I'm saying with that is, if we go back, let me find you a side saddle picture. When I was working in England and I met a gentleman who was really, really knowledgeable about this side saddles. And he worked for a company by the name Cliff Barnsby. That was the oldest company in the world. And they made side saddles And there I got to see a person. So here on this side saddle, you see the lady jumping with a side saddle over a fence. They used to field hunt, and some areas in England still do. And what is so remarkable and what I love about the side saddle is it is fitted to the horse's body and not to somebody's opinion. Because if you don't fit a side saddle to the horse correctly, that rider will slip and slide all over the place. Needless to say that the side saddle is completely different on the left side than on the right side, because the rider's legs are always on the left side. So we have a complete different tree on one side than the other side. On the left side, the tree points are much, much longer, and on the right side, much, much shorter. On the left side is much, much bigger. The opening in the tree width on the left is bigger. So most horses, as we learned and know, are bigger on the left side. Numerous theories out there why it is, but we all know one thing: we mount and do everything on most of the thing on the left side. Most horses have the mane on the right, bigger left shoulder pushes the mane comb over, and that bigger left shoulder here is really well fitted in a side saddle. Almost never fitted in a normal stride saddle like we know it today. And that's why I like side saddles better, because they are paying attention to this. Okay, that's not bad riding or deformity on the horse. That's normal. Horses, like human, favor one side. And if you ignore it, the saddle will twist. And if you have a side saddle and you have a side saddle with twist, the rider will fall and the horse will not perform. So very, very interesting saddle. And when I came to Canada in 1986, this lady came up with her 3 big vans and she showed me 28 different side saddles. I thought I saw a lot of different side saddles in England, none compared to what I saw here from the lady who gives lessons and teaches. Her name was Louise Henry from Kitchener, Ontario, here in Canada. Very, very special woman. I don't think she still does it, but very interesting saddles.
Okay, thank you for that. And just going back to the courses, I want to sort of invite everyone to check out our website, saddlefitforlifeacademy.com, because all the courses that we have there, we have both certificate courses, short courses, and we have pretty much anything for everyone. So depending on what you want to learn, how deep you want to go into saddle fit education, we have something for you, and you're able to completely customize your education. What we see on the screen right now in regards to Germany, Canada, South Africa, what these are dates for our certified equine ergonomist courses, which are taking place in these countries. And the way that our courses, our certificate courses, are designed are you do an online theory, and then you do 4 days of in-barn, and it will be taught by Jochen at all these countries. And then for those who want to actually go forward and complete their certification, there is an externship where you go out and you measure 30 horses, either your own, your friends, your family's horses, anyone, and you submit it for review. At that point, our evaluators would review them, give you some feedback, and basically what it does is it makes sure that you're accurately applying the learned theories and methods that were taught within the theory and the 4-day course. And it helps prepare you for eventual certification, which happens at the end of the 30 evaluations.
So this may be a good area to shout out help to everybody who's listening, because as I said, I'm approaching 60 and traveling around the world all the time is getting a little old. So I know this webinar is heard all over the world. So if you're interested to become a trainer, please let us know, and we will happily work with you. And with that, it is always a pleasure to talk to you every Friday. I promise next week we will have solve this problem. And as always, I like to say goodbye with my favorite video from Sonia. If it plays. Let's try that again. Oh, I don't want to.
Perhaps we'll leave it off for this webinar. But what I would like to say is, during the courses, whether you take the certificate or any course, one great aspect of our academy is you receive support for the rest of your life. So whether you're doing a certificate course or the introductory, or just, you know, a short 3-lesson online video course, if you have questions, we will always be there. And you will have lifetime access to the courses, which are updated on a regular basis. So if you're part of our Certified Equine Ergonomist course and you're taking the online portion, if in 2 years we update several modules, you will have immediate access to it. And we always send out announcements saying that, you know, we've added something or we've changed something. And that's the one difference about Saddlefit for Life to other academies, is we're always learning. We're always working with people within the industry to provide the best education possible, because for us, our mission is to protect the horse. Full stop. There is nothing else.
Wait until you guys see next Friday the cool article Sonia found just today from the University of Copenhagen. So I say goodbye, everybody, and I look forward to talk to you next week.
Take care, everyone.